Hey everyone, I'm sure you guys have already heard of the super simple coding project, which is essentially just a MATLAB project. And what a MATLAB project essentially is that you essentially input a bunch of text into a phrase. Here's a clip of that.
So essentially what a MadLib is that you change a few words inside. So as you can see from the story, George was the name, verb with ing, walking, place, school, time, noon, noun, lady, verb, run. George was walking home from school at noon when they met a young lady and decided to run. And with the same program, you use name Beyonce, verb with ing, eating, place, Paris, time, midnight, noun, waffle, verb, sing. The story becomes Beyonce was eating home from Paris at midnight when they met a young waffle and decided to sing. So that's how MadLibs work.
Well, how do we actually make this project more customizable and much better to use compared to a regular MATLAB project? Well, in this tutorial, I will teach you exactly how to do that, and you will be able to learn two very important things. The first one is prompt engineering using ChatGPT, and the second one is, of course, actually using the ChatGPT API, which will be pretty freaking cool. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so before we do anything, let's just first actually show you what the code does. So if I just run this, let's actually write a story. So a story about a unicorn. As you can see from the bottom, what type of story do you want? I want it to be about a unicorn. Now it's going to generate, wait for ChatGPT because it's quite slow. Now we have to enter our verbs because it's a MATLib. And then of course, make, character, Bonnie, adjective, blue, verb, make. Oh no, I already did that. Run, character, rock, adjective, brown. Let's do brown. Once upon a time, a blue unicorn named Bonnie was running in a brown forest. She came across a friendly hedgehog named Brock. The hedgehog make the unicorn's brown name. They run around the forest, finding joy in their companionship. But wait, there's a link too. And if you click it, it actually gives you an image of what happens, which is pretty cool in my opinion. But not only that, if we test out another tool, we can see that there's also a speech version. So that's essentially how that works. Thank you for this. Right, so essentially this is the project. So at the start, of course, you're going to first install OpenAI. So how you do this would be just simply inputting pip install OpenAI into your terminal. So essentially what you do is pip install OpenAI in your terminal. Of course, this is not the terminal. But after you do that, you can finally import the OpenAI library, and that's where you actually get all the tools that you need for this project. Next, you of course have to actually get your OpenAI key. And of course, there are a bunch of YouTube tutorials that you can get, which I will not be getting into because, well, you can find it on your own. Now, of course, we need to actually get what kind of story they want. So this is where we need a little bit of coding knowledge. This is where we ask them what type of story do they want. So here, of course, I let type of story equals the input, which is essentially a story about a fish or a story about a mermaid or anything they really want to put. And of course, this text gets put into this message phrase. So if you look into this message phrase, you will see, write me a story about a blah, blah, blah. So that's exactly what they're going to put as the input. This gives it a bit more customizability, which makes it a lot more better of a project. And of course, you can change up all of this code if you wanted to make it fit your MadLib project a lot more, if you want it to be a bit more specific or a bit more loose, depending on whatever case you want. And essentially what I have put here is the story should be less than 300 characters. And of course, we need the MadLib's things. So what I did is replace 3 adjectives as the word adjective, 2 verbs as the word verb, 1 ing verb as the word verb ing, and of course, 2 characters as the word character. All of these are surrounded by the square brackets to actually get, of course, the inputs. Now, of course, we have to generate the prompt. So of course, this is actually the prompt. And to actually make your MadLib project the best possible, add as many specific keywords and add as many sentences as possible to make sure ChatGPT knows exactly what you want. That is why I added a lot of details and made this essentially a paragraph instead of adding only 1 or 2 sentences that probably would have made ChatGPT a bit more faulty. That is why now we can finally get the message from ChatGPT. So that is where this code comes from. Now, if you don't understand this code, it's fine. Personally, I just got it from the ChatGPT API document. So that is actually where everything is stored. So you don't really have to understand everything here because, well, of course, it's just the machine working by itself. And of course, since this AI is not going to really remember the responses, we only really need one input and one output, which is great because we don't have to remember anything, which would be extra code. But we'll get into that stuff later on. Now, of course, that we have the message, which is story, using all of this code. Of course, we use the model ChatGPT-4. The message is essentially the message, which is, of course, the prompt. And then that is how we get the ChatGPT to work. And of course, now we have to actually replace the words inside. Of course, we made it a MadLib. We have to replace the words with the user and what they want the words to be. So of course, this is why I made count C, count V, count A, and count I. And so essentially, what we do is we parse through every single character in the story. And if the verb ing is in the story, if the count I isn't 1, which at the start it isn't because, of course, they're all 0, then count I plus equals 1. So this essentially adds 1 to count I so that when it equals 1, it can't actually run anymore. So this is exactly what we want, as we only want one verb to be verb ing. So this is how we do this. And so now that we can get the verb ing, we can ask it for an input, and then we just simply replace that verb with the input. And that's really how the main code works. And so we repeat this function for every single one of these. Of course, we want 2 verbs here. So then we made it equal to 2. We want 2 characters. And of course, lastly, we want 3 adjectives. And that's how all of these work. And of course, we want the input here. And then we essentially replace it by the character. We replace the character essentially by char, which is the input that we got. And then we want to replace that by count C. So this is the third, or the I amount, or C in this case. This is the Cth character that there is. Because there are multiple characters, as you can see, there are 2, there needs to be a lot of these. So that's why we have that. Lastly, of course, we print the story, and then we actually, well, here is just for fun. So we have response equals client.generate. And this is essentially also ChatGPT API. And I'm just testing the API for fun. So if we actually run it in our terminal, just 1 second, this is just a test. But if we actually run it, let me bring it up here. Oh, yeah, I have to input my API key. But if you do actually copy the code, which I will link in my GitHub below, it should work perfectly. Why? Because first of all, there aren't any errors. And secondly, everything is pretty simple, as you just need a bit of OpenAI documentation, and everything else is mainly beginner knowledge. Thank you for listening to my tutorial. And that is how I created a MadLib project, which used image recognition and image generation, as well as voice generation with a bit of OpenAI API. Thank you.